The content in this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only. Whilst we love unpacking psychological research and evidence-based insights to support wellbeing, this podcast is not a substitute for personal mental health care or therapy. Nothing we say should be taken as individualized advice. If anything you hear brings up concerns for you, we strongly encourage you to speak with your GP, psychologist, or another qualified health professional. You deserve support that's tailored to you. Welcome to This Might Help, where psychology research meets real life. We're your hosts. I'm Dr. Kira Hart.
And I'm Dr. Lauren Rossetti, and we're two Australian psychologists, and we're back for season 2.
Yay, thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, we're back in your ears and maybe in your eyes if you're watching on YouTube. And we're excited for another season. Yeah. I'm excited. Are you excited?
Very excited. I feel like 2026 is going to be a great year.
Yes.
For the podcast.
And just for
us personally, professionally.
And for everyone else.
And for all our listeners.
Yeah. It's just a great year. We're starting another season. We are still unpacking psychology research and chatting all about how we can practically apply that to our lives. And today we're starting off with burnout.
Yes. Yeah. Which I think is a really good place to start at the start of the year, where hopefully we're feeling refreshed.
Yeah.
We've come off our summer break. You're back at work, maybe you're back at uni.
Yeah.
Things aren't too hectic at the moment.
Yes.
So it's a good time to kind of like put in those preventative strategies to avoid possible burnout later on in the year.
Yes.
We want to avoid burnout.
Yes, we do. I do. And so this is maybe a selfishly driven podcast episode topic because I would like to prevent becoming burnt out this year.
Fair.
So yeah, I may have just put this in the mix because I wanted to learn.
To research it. Exactly.
Yeah. So we'll talk about what burnout actually is and why it is really so common, especially for young people as well. And also, what it is, the research behind it, and then what we can practically do to help address burnout.
Yeah. Love it. Before we get into the research for today's episode, do you want to kick us off, as always, with your wellbeing wins and wobbles?
Yes, we've been away for a while, so there's lots of time for wellbeing wins and wobbles. I probably forgot lots of them, but in my break, I went to Vietnam for a little bit, for a little holiday.
So lucky.
Yeah, that was lovely. And there were lots of wellbeing wins, mostly eating lots and lots of good food.
I was going to say food related.
Yeah, just all of the best food and all of those little spots that you find yourself in and you just try and then it's like the best thing you've ever eaten, lots of that. So that was definitely a win. My wellbeing wobble was getting scammed whilst we were there. So our accommodation just didn't exist in our last spot, which was on an island like off the bottom of Vietnam. And we got there and it just wasn't there. And so...
What do you mean by it wasn't there? Like it just didn't exist, or it got blown away?
There was something at the address, like there was a building, but it was definitely not our accommodation and the hotel name and whatever, it was not like it, that wasn't there.
Okay.
So it was like this little apartment building, but we'd booked a villa and all of these things.
Yes.
So it just wasn't there. It didn't exist.
It wasn't legitimate.
Yeah. And so long story short, lots of navigating what to do. And then we found a new spot and had the rest of our holiday, which was good.
Wow.
So it ended up fine, but a bit of a stressful time.
That would have been so stressful.
Yeah. So that was the wobble, but overall the holiday was definitely a win. Wow. How about you? What's your wellbeing win and wobble?
My wellbeing win, my sister listens to the podcast, and I'm not just saying this because you listen, but my beautiful sister got married over the holidays, so that was dare I say, like the highlight of my life. Like it was just such a beautiful day. I adore her partner. He's a really lovely man. So that was a really beautiful celebration and definitely my wellbeing win. Beautiful day with family and friends. And then my wellbeing wobble, maybe something happened this week. Nothing major, but just like something kind of triggered me, and that kind of brought up like feelings of like just like low feelings and like a bit of rumination. But
yeah,
I'm glad I identified like, okay, this thing happened. It's triggered this low mood. Let's get on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, very proactive of you. Great.
Thank you. Thanks.
Turning your wobbles into, you know, constructive opportunities.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's what we're
about. Yeah. So we are unpacking burnout today, like we said. And I think a good place to start with this topic is actually understanding what burnout is.
Yeah.
Because I think that it gets kind of mixed up with a lot of different things.
Yes.
And it's hard to know what actually is burnout. And there's a few really key features of burnout.
Yeah.
So there's been lots of study about burnout in the past. It's I guess really related to kind of your occupation or work. It's not a medical condition, you know, so it's not like a diagnosed medical condition. No. It's more of a response or a response that you're having to circumstances typically related to work. Yes. So now occupation could also be things like study. So if you do study full time, or it could be your workplace, whatever that is, but typically it's related to that.
Yeah.
And it's often from this kind of chronic workplace stress that hasn't really been successfully managed, or that could be also within, you know, your study as well. There is a researcher that has done a lot of stuff on burnout, who is Dr. Christina Maslach from UC Berkeley, and they also do, there's another podcast episode we'll link where they chat a lot about their work on burnout, but they talk about these three kind of key features of burnout.
The first feature is emotional exhaustion. So feeling completely depleted or worn out by your work or study.
Yes. The other two features of burnout, so I guess emotional exhaustion, you can also be feeling with stress or, you know, just being like really run down.
Overwhelmed.
Yeah. And that's still a core feature of burnout, but there are two other elements that really, I guess, make it burnout.
Yes.
One of those is cynicism, or like being, very cynical, becoming detached, having these negative feelings about your job.
Yes.
So you're at work, you're feeling like everything sucks.
Yeah.
You're really cynical about the workplace. I think things that maybe in the past didn't used to bother you so much, or you didn't notice them, they're all very evident now.
Yes.
So it's kind of, I guess, that really negative outlook on your job. You might wake up and think, you know, you really don't want to go there every day. So there's that negative outlook. And the third element of burnout is feeling this reduced personal kind of efficacy or efficiency with your work.
Yeah.
So you might feel, it might both be that you're actually not getting as much done. So you might feel really unproductive.
Yeah.
Or like it's really hard to get through your work. But also you might just feel generally like you don't have the skills you used to have to do the job.
Yes.
Yeah. So you might think, oh, I can't, like you might feel incompetent, or you might feel like you can't get through the work, or you might question your skills as well. Even if you are still doing a really good job, you might have personally this kind of negative outlook on your own skills.
Yes.
In the workplace.
So often people experiencing burnout may have fatigue, which people can probably relate to.
Yes.
Reduced engagement in their work, increased cynicism and like negative attitudes towards their work.
Yeah.
And another big one is kind of like questioning the meaning or the value of the work. Like you're going to the office or you're studying for, 10 hours a day, but what's the point? Like what are you actually achieving?
Yeah. Once burnout develops, or I guess once you're in that state where you are experiencing burnout, and that's kind of the response you're having within the workplace, this can make the work feel increasingly stressful. So obviously if you're going to work and you're feeling like this all sucks, like kind of everything feels hard, you don't feel good at your work, like you don't feel kind of good at the job anymore or like good at what you're doing, then this can all create this sense of like it being increasingly stressful to go to work. That then obviously can further play into those feelings. So, then you're having a stress response, and so then that can make you more tired and exhausted. It can increase some of those feelings, and it creates a bit of a cycle.
Horrible cycle, which we want to prevent.
Avoid. Yes, avoid at all costs. So there are 6 areas which Christina Maslach that we mentioned before, which they talk about kind of contributing to this mismatch that happens between the workplace and the person working there, or like the employer and employee. So I guess it's that relationship or dynamic. Both parts of that are contributing or playing a part to burnout. So it's not like you're just personally
tired.
Or, you've just suddenly developed this cynicism about work from thin air. There's all these factors that lead to this.
And these 6 factors are really interesting, I think.
The first one, which is probably the thing we most think to when we think about burnout, is workload. So there's too much work or there's too many responsibilities, but there's not enough resources to deal with the workload. So by resources, that could be there's not enough time that you have to do the work within the hours, or there's not enough people around to like manage the workload. So the first element is really what we would mostly think about contributing to burnout, which is workload.
The second area is control. So how much flexibility and ownership we feel like we have over our work. And this can be in terms of things like the tasks and whether we have say and whether we have control over what tasks we do, but also other things like when we're able to take our holidays. And obviously there might be some barriers to that, but when we don't feel like we have control over our work, that can lead to feelings of burnout.
The third area is reward, and this is, I guess, not necessarily just how much you're paid, although that can be an element of it too. Like, do you feel compensated correctly for the work that you're doing? But also it can just be recognition of work. So are you acknowledged or celebrated for the things you accomplish at your job? Do you feel like that's recognized, or do you feel kind of undervalued within the workplace? The fourth area is community, and this is really just generally about that workplace culture and, the people within the workplace and how you all gel. The fifth area is fairness, which is, just do you feel like you're being treated fairly? And the final area, which maybe people don't think about as often, is values. And do you see meaning in the job that you do? So do you feel like what you're doing in your workplace kind of connects with your values? But also, I guess that there are not elements of the job that are directly opposing your morals or your values. So for example, and Christina Maslach talks about this really well, that, do you feel like there is something within your job that you're doing that you don't agree with, or you find morally questionable, or, it's just kind of a icky feeling that can also contribute to burnout. So there's, I guess, like 6 main areas that we would think of where if all of those things are happening, or a combination of those things are happening, that might contribute to, again, that like feeling of cynicism and that feeling of not doing a good job and the exhaustion. And when all of that kind of comes into play, then we can have this response, which is burnout.
Before we get into the prevalence of burnout, especially among young people, let's have a bit of a chat about our own personal experiences with burnout. Have you ever experienced this before or felt this before?
You're like smiling at me because you know that I've absolutely yes. Yes, lots and lots. At different stages, and both, I guess, workplace burnout, but then as in terms of a job, and then also burnout in study. So there were different stages across the PhD where you're really in the thick of things, and I guess the light at the end of the tunnel is not super clear, and have just been stuck in a stage of feeling very cynical about the thesis, very very not confident in my skills to do the thesis, and exhausted and tired. So, you know, all of those kind of features ring true. And then I think other times I've realized, and I actually realized this at one point last year, when something happened that I knew I had the skills to manage, and I also knew it was not a particularly big deal. Like I was just dealing with one little like problem or one thing that I had to manage at work. And then I realized, oh, this is really affecting me. Like I was very stressed about it. I was really ruminating about how that was going to go. And I felt like I didn't have the skills to manage that problem necessarily. But on reflection, that problem was actually quite minor, and I definitely had the skills to deal with it. But I think because I was in a state of like quite significant burnout, my outlook on that situation was that it was a very big deal, and that I didn't have the skills to manage it. And I actually spent a lot of time being stressed about it when I didn't really need to be in that state, or like not need to be, but I knew that that was not typical. That was kind of a wake up point for me, where I thought, this is not how I would normally respond to this situation. But because I am so burnt out, every little thing is becoming a really big thing.
Yes.
So that can be a clue for people even when they're thinking about their workplaces and trying to identify the signs of burnout. Are these things that you normally can manage and you do definitely have the skills to manage? Are they suddenly becoming big things that are really impacting you?
Yeah. And if we think about the definition of burnout, it sounds like you were emotionally exhausted and you were feeling like a reduced professional efficacy, even though you had the skills at the time, you just couldn't see yourself with the skills.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Kira?
I've definitely experienced burnout. I feel like so many people have at different times. I actually think during COVID was a time of burnout for me, which I think is interesting because I was doing lots of work from home, but I feel like in terms of my workload, I actually had enough time to do my work because, you know, I wasn't going out socializing, I wasn't commuting, I had extra hours in my day to kind of study, do part-time work and kind of get through the tasks. But I think I felt really burnt out because I was missing those other of the 6 areas that Christina Maslach talks about. Like I didn't have a sense of community, or a strong sense of community. Like I didn't have kind of those interactions that you have with colleagues or peers where you just say like, oh my gosh, that task was really hard, and you just have like a little vent and then you feel better. Or I didn't have kind of those like, I don't want to say like in-person rewards, but you know, when like you're working with someone, you do a hard task, but you know, you're working alongside a colleague and they say something kind to you, or you go out for a dinner to celebrate having done like that tough task together or something. Like there is those moments of celebrating kind of when you do more face-to-face work. Which I didn't experience during COVID because we were all working remotely and studying remotely. So I think that was a time of burnout for me, kind of lacking those other areas that lead to that downward spiral.
Yes. And in that situation, there's also less downtime or separation between the work that you're doing and the rest of your life. And so then that bleed through where everything becomes mixed and muddled and there's no clear, you know, you time that is a break from work. That contributes to this problem, which we'll talk about when we go through our strategies. So tell me, Kira, about what is the state of burnout. And it does feel like we all experience it, and like it's probably increasing in like how common it is. Tell me the things I need to know.
You're exactly right. It is unfortunately really common.
Yeah.
So there was research by Mental Health UK in 2025. They found that 84% of millennials and 68% of Gen Z are experiencing burnout. So way more than half of us. Additionally, according to a 2023 survey by Deloitte, 77% of millennials reported burnout in their current role, with 42% of millennials having left a job specifically because of burnout. So we're seeing lots of people moving out of their workplace and leaving roles because they're experiencing burnout.
Yeah. I had a dinner recently with a bunch of healthcare friends who are in all different kind of areas of healthcare, and they were speaking about a lot of kind of mass resignations within kind of the hospital system specifically, where people are leaving because, again, resources are limited. There's a lot of like hiring freezes as well. So it's really hard for these workplaces to actually employ more people to support. Anyway, big messy situation, and a lot of burnout, and so a lot of people resigning from their work. Healthcare, I think, is also an area where there is a lot of burnout, and that's really common. But I guess just for young people in general, there's a lot of elements which are contributing to a really high percentage of burnout.
Yes. So let's speak through these elements now. The first one being economic pressures. We know that we're facing really high costs of living, and, you know, we're in a housing affordability crisis. There's salary stagnation, and people are leaving university with really high student debt. So it's understandable that young people are kind of entering the workforce with all these financial pressures, and maybe they're, you know, staying in a job or taking on more work and trying to, you know, remain employable and do all that they can to have some sense of financial security, even if it's at the cost of overworking themselves, feeling burnt out.
And like we were talking about with jobs and even that high percentage of people leaving roles because of burnout, on the other hand, there's still a lot of people who are staying in jobs because they still need, you know, they still need that job. It might pay well. It might be really hard to find another role, or even, you know, that's quite a scary step. And so lots of people likely staying in jobs where the culture is creating those, you know, those kind of sick circumstances that contribute to burnout.
Another factor contributing to young people experiencing burnout is the digital overload that we experience. And I feel like we talk about, you know, technology and the massive use of technology that we all have in like every second episode. But it's so relevant to working and the workplace as well, especially when there's that blurring of boundaries or blurring of lines between being on at work and being on your work emails, and then clocking off for the day, but still maybe having emails on your phone or on your laptop and getting these constant notifications and feeling as though you're still on the clock even after hours.
And it makes it a lot harder to, like you said, create that separation in terms of when you're at work and when you're not at work. But even just it keeps your brain thinking about and keeps your mind thinking about workplace. And particularly if you have a stressful job as well, and that workplace environment has a lot of responsibility and stress, if you're seeing on your phone an email pop up or a notification about some element of work, your brain is then going to be like, oh, okay, well now I'm thinking about that stressful thing, and you don't get that downtime in your brain to not be thinking about the job, which we need. There's also another element that I guess makes burnout quite prevalent for young people, which can be the gap or the disconnect between what we expect work life to be like and then what it actually is like once we start work. So for a lot of us, we're now, you know, spending a lot of time studying and at uni, and that's a really different lifestyle, or can be really quite different to then when you enter the workforce.
Yes.
Especially for the first time. And so maybe there are expectations for how that job is going to look, how it's going to be, even things, you know, where you might feel like it was going to be a really positive, supportive workplace, or you were told all these expectations for how things are going to be.
Yeah.
And then when it's not like that, it can really, I guess, contribute or exacerbate a lot of those things that lead to burnout. For example, you know, you might feel like you're not compensated enough, or like you're undervalued, or you might have been told there was going to be all this flexibility and, you know, you'd be allowed to take leave then and do this and that. And then that's not the case.
A hiring manager will never make a job sound bad. Like they will sell you the best version of the job, and you'll sign up being like, this sounds amazing.
Yes.
Whether it is or not, time will tell.
Yes. One other thing that I think could be playing into this too is all of, you know, we talk about like hustle culture and like this whole, you know, drive to do more all of the time. And that is really quite prevalent in young people today. There's a lot of content out there that we see about like how to be so super efficient, and a lot of that efficiency is about work. So, you know, it might be a side thing that started, or just like navigating the career ladder more quickly, and obviously that might be associated with then working a lot more and blurring those lines between work and life.
Yes.
Although there is a nice shift, I think, as well that we're seeing, where work-life balance is being kind of promoted or put forward more by other people, which is good. That, you know, that's helpful.
But there's still that paradox where work-life balance is promoted more than ever, but young people are still experiencing burnout at really massive rates.
Yes.
So let's talk about the strategy.
How can we prevent this from happening in 2026?
Such a great question. The first strategies we want to talk about center around setting boundaries. Now, I know in psychology, boundaries is a bit of a buzzword, and it's always like thrown about like set boundaries, protect your inner peace. But what this can actually look like at work can be really practical. So if we consider like our digital boundaries, maybe it's setting no notifications after like 7 p.m. or not checking your work emails after work hours. Or another area boundaries can come into place is by taking regular vacations or using your leave throughout the year and making sure you're resting. When you're on leave, you're not checking your emails, you're not doing like a little bit of work from home, but still technically on leave. It's like when you're on leave, you're resting and you're like unwinding.
For someone who chronically has a problem with this, not me, but maybe me, this can feel so hard. And I guess a place that I've been in before is a very like all or nothing mentality to this. So, okay, I need to not do anything when I'm on leave, which is like the ideal, right? Not touching any of that work. But I guess sometimes I can go into extremes. It's either thinking I will work in that time. And so then the whole time away feels kind of guilt-ridden because there's this expectation in my mind that I'll get all these work-related things done. And so sometimes it's just a small step that will add up over time to help set these boundaries, rather than it feeling like a big scary step that you're going from not having any boundaries to suddenly having the ultimate level of boundary setting abilities. But that can be so hard. So, for example, there's small things that can be done that will help to build this up over time. So for something like saying no to things, which is really tricky for a lot of us, it can be, you know, you might get asked to add one little task to a job or to your, you know, everyday job. And instead of just saying, yes,
I will do that,
that's fine, you could say, okay, if this is, you know, important for the job, happy to, do this thing, but can we have a conversation about what can be taken off my plate so that can fit in? Or it might be just, not getting involved in absolutely every element of the workplace that you might be used to. So especially for a lot of young women, I find that it's very common for people to get involved in all of the workplace social elements and organising and taking on the role of really spearheading or leading a lot of things that, they might not be related to your job, and maybe there's some things where you don't necessarily have to put your hand up for them all the time.
Yes.
Not to say they're not great to get involved in to some extent, but maybe it's thinking about, this is a super busy period of the work year for me. I know there's going to be a lot going on. So I maybe don't need to put my hand up to organise the cake and the present and the XYZ other thing that someone else can take a handle of that this time.
So true. Another area of strategies are around job crafting.
Yes. Tell me all about job crafting because I don't know a lot about this.
Job crafting basically means influencing the areas of work that we do have some influence over.
Yeah.
So, for example, we might have influence over the tasks we do at work, or kind of how many or what type of tasks we do. We have influence over our relationships at work. So who we spend time with, who we don't spend time with, who are our work support people and how much time we spend with them.
Yeah.
Also kind of our thoughts about work and our cognitions about work. Do we take time to reflect and, appreciate the effort that we've put into tasks, and are we proud of ourselves?
Yeah.
Or are we thinking, work sucks, I don't want to be here?
Yes. And because burnout involves that cynicism and also feeling, I guess, a reduced sense of efficacy of our work. So we feel less capable of the work that we're doing. Those two things are key features of burnout. And so, we will have all of these moments where we're thinking these thoughts about the job. So, for example, like I said earlier, where there was a situation and a task that I actually could handle and it was quite small, but because I was in a state of exhaustion and stress and feeling all of these things within burnout, it meant that my brain and my mind went straight to, this is a really big, hard, scary thing. I don't have the skills to handle it. And so part of, I guess, this thinking about how we're thinking at work is to identify that and then know, is this reality? What is the kind of evidence for that? Is there evidence that this is actually a really big, scary thing? Or if I take a step back and give myself some perspective, is what level of challenge is this task, or how stressful is it? But then also those thoughts about, do I have the skills or I don't have the skills, I can't manage this. What's the evidence for that? You've probably dealt with this problem before, or something trickier, and gotten through it.
And you've done it. Yeah. Exactly.
So rethinking or reframing some of those thoughts.
Yeah.
And like what you were saying about with tasks and relationships, there'll be a lot of elements within the workplace that maybe you don't have control over. So, for example, maybe it's your manager or a colleague that works in the desk next to you who you maybe don't get along with, or they're not your person. It's tricky. And so maybe that element there's not a lot of control over, but you might have control over other elements. And so it's looking to shape what you can shape.
Yeah.
So is there, like you said, a colleague in another department or someone who you really get along with and is a really great support person, and you can book in to have lunch with them, or you can check in with them in the day, or you can jump on a task or a team or a project that they're on to help build that. So it might feel like, there's this one person and that they're directly involved in the job and I have no control over that. And that's, I guess a bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
But what else can you tackle that you can control?
proactively asking for help or the resources you need can be a really great way to prevent that burnout. So if you notice yourself feeling overwhelmed or overworked at work, being proactive and as soon as possible kind of maybe reaching out to your manager and saying like, hey, I need some support with this task, or would someone be able to share the workload with me on this? Or if I'm going to be working these extra hours, can I please be paid for it?
Yes.
Or whatever you kind of need for that extra support.
Yes.
Actually reaching out and vocalizing that.
Yeah. And that could be, you know, regular check-ins that you schedule. So, you know that there is a time that you have where it's a check-in. How am I tracking across, you know, work? What do you foresee falling through the cracks? So it might be that at the beginning of the year, especially now we're at the beginning of 2026, so we can kind of look forward and think, are there common pitfalls or periods of time or tasks where you can foresee this is going to be really challenging? That's probably going to contribute to burnout. I know that's a time where I feel really under-resourced, or I feel like there's just not enough support. And so being proactive about communicating that.
Yes.
Okay, like I need an extra, or I need to drop this task during this time, or I need an extra person on the team during this time. Like, I guess communicating that in advance is a way of preventing getting to the point where you've been 6 months of just being so overworked. You then end up in the state of burnout. And like we said, because that changes the outlook on work and the relationship with work, it takes a long time, and it's really tricky to kind of build back out of that. And so again, the proactive strategies are what we want.
Definitely. And on this point, having a good manager can be such a preventative strategy for burnout.
Yes.
Like having people at work who support you and who want to see you succeed and who are flexible and who care for you. Go such a long way. In providing that support.
And we've spoken a lot so far about, I guess, those individual or personal strategies that can be put in place to help prevent burnout. But obviously, burnout is an occupational phenomenon. Like, you know, it's something happening within workplace or within study. And a lot to do with burnout, even those 6 elements we talked about, they're very dependent on the workplace that you're in and on the way that workplace system is structured. And so it can't, like, burnout can't be solved just by yourself. Like if you're the worker or the employee, you can't necessarily fix that just on your own. You know, it's a relationship between the workplace and the person. And so like you said, the leadership is so important, and a lot of it is communicating these challenges. And sometimes there are scenarios where there are so many restrictions or limitations in what the workplace can do, or maybe it's just that they're not willing to do those things. And then that's a situation where thinking about, well, this isn't going to work then. And like, what's my next steps?
If it's not sustainable long term.
And if you've tried all of the things, you know, if you've communicated those needs, if you're really working to set up solid boundaries, like you're doing all your side of the relationship, and there's nothing happening on the other side of the relationship, then that's when, you know, we're hitting a wall and other options probably need to come into play.
It's also important to think about the foundations of our mental health. And we know that psychological exhaustion is one of the key elements of burnout. And when we pare everything back, it's really important that we're looking after our mental health and well-being at a baseline level. So we've spoken a lot across different episodes about nutrition and getting enough sleep, sustaining a regular exercise routine, making sure you're resting and recovering, and doing these things to look after your mental health. We know with burnout that psychological exhaustion is a major part of that. But having that baseline good mental health where we're looking after our well-being, we're sleeping, we're resting, we're recovering, we're exercising, that will buffer against the stress and exhaustion that we experience when we feel burnt out.
Yes, and it helps to then feel more capable when you go into the workplace,
Yes.
which then helps you feel, better able to manage those stresses.
Yeah.
And then that can lessen the likelihood, that you're then going to end up in the place of burnout.
Yeah.
And like we said, it's not, again, we're talking about one side of the coin, like one side is our part, but helping to do those things as much as possible means that, there's less likelihood that we'll end up in the place of burnout.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking back to our self-care episode as well. And, a key thing for myself as well has been like scheduling in that self-care time and blocking out, like, this is not work related time. I find it particularly challenging for weekends, which, should be when we're having this rest and this, mental separation from work. But I found particularly, in the study years and in previous years that I'd get to the weekend, give myself a list of all of these workplace things I wanted to do. Like I wanted to tick off XYZ things, and I'd spend the whole weekend maybe not doing them, but feeling guilty about it. And so in a shift to prevent that, because I think that contributes significantly to burnout, is setting aside a scheduled time of work if you are working on the weekend. So, it could be a side hobby or a whatever, but like blocking the time in for that and then spending the rest of the time having that scheduled self-care rest time where you're filling up your cup. This is not time when I'm working, and I've given myself permission for that. I've put aside the time. And so you can then help to establish that boundary in your brain of like, no, I don't need to think about that work task because I said that, the whole of Sunday was just
Relaxing,
me time,
chilling.
no work.
Love that.
Self-care. Schedule it in. Go listen to our self-care episode.
That's all we've got to say about burnout for today.
Yes, there's probably lots more we could talk about, but we have covered a lot about burnout and hopefully given some strategies to help with preventing burnout in 2026, which is what we want.
Yep, let's get that percentage of young people experiencing burnout down.
Right down. It would be good if it was at 0, but we can just hope for a few more percentages off. Girl can dream. So try some of those strategies. I'll be trying all of them this year. And that is the first episode of season 2 and of 2026.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
It is so great to be back. And if you want to see more of us or see our little in-between posts and whatnot, you can follow us at This Might Help podcast on Kira. You had a task of learning the handles last year, and I'm going to give you until next episode to have learnt them. But we're at This Might Help podcast on Instagram and TikTok. The full video version's also on YouTube. As always, there are resources and helplines in the show notes and references from today's episode. But otherwise, we'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
This podcast was recorded on Wurundjeri land. We acknowledge and pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of this country. We honour their knowledge and resilience and the ongoing impacts of colonisation on wellbeing.